There was recently an article published in Point of Beginning magazine. It's one of the surveyor magazines in the United States. It was by Jeff Lucas. He's an attorney and a land surveyor, really smart guy. The article in Professional POB magazine was based on an article. It was a response to an article that appeared in Bloomberg Business Week about a company called Vizaline that was supposedly using technology to put land surveyors out of business. And this company ended up being sued by the licensing board in Mississippi, and there was kind of a big brouhaha. And so Mr. Lucas was writing about that dispute, and I wanted to prepare a short video about that particular mess over there in Mississippi because I think it teaches surveyors some valuable things about licensing and about business and how you provide value to clients. And so I know not everybody's going to agree with what I have to say in this video. There's going to be a lot of strong opinions on this issue, but I wanted to share my perspective, and not just for surveyors, but also for potential clients that might be watching our YouTube channel, because I think this illustrates, why it's important to hire a good boundary surveyor, and I think it illustrates the fact that there's a lot of people out there that will take your money and provide you with a garbage product. So you need to be careful about that. So what is Vizaline? So Vizaline is the name of this company in Mississippi. It's a small business there. They have, I don't know, somewhere between 5 to 10 employees. And what they do is they provide what's called a Viza-Plat. Okay. So Viza-Plat shows a parcel boundary on an aerial or satellite photo, and then they tell you, a few things. They tell you if the boundary closes mathematically and some other things like that. Now, when you get one of these reports, they slap on a big fat, "This is not a legal survey" disclaimer. It's right on the front of the report. Okay, right on the front of the plat. And the plat, the plats look cheesy. These guys are not, I imagine you can get one of these Viza-Plats for a couple $100. They are not professionally drafted products. They look like something a 5-year-old would put together with an Etch-a-Sketch. Okay, so they're not a product I would be proud of, certainly as a boundary surveyor. But they're selling them. They got about, according to their website, they got about 30 banks across the southeastern United States that are using them, that are buying these Viza-Plats. So the article by Jeff Lucas raises some important questions. Raised some important questions for me. So here's the first one: Is a Viza-Plat a boundary survey? And if it's not a boundary survey, how are they making these things? That's the first question. Second question is Viza-Plat practicing boundary surveying without a license, right? That's why they got sued by the licensing board in Mississippi. So that's an important question, I think. The third question I have is should surveyors have their torches and pitchforks out about these guys? Should we be burning down their office building? And then the fourth thing is, given everything we know about their product, could the Viza-Plat product harm the public or the clients of this company? Are they in a position where they could potentially harm the public? So let's go through these 4 questions. We'll start with the first one. I'm going to break the first question into 2 parts. So here's the first part of question 1. Is a Viza-Plat a boundary survey? Nope, it's not. It's super clear to me, based on the examples that I saw and what I read in the articles, that a Viza-Plat is not a boundary survey. It doesn't even look like a boundary survey. I think a Viza-Plat is like a slightly less lame version of a tax assessor map. So it's not a boundary survey. I think that's clear to me. There's no field survey done. It's just not a boundary survey. So how is a Viza-Plat made then? If it's not a boundary survey, how are they making these things? Well, here's what they're doing. They're drafting up deed measurements when they're available, or they're using GIS parcel data that you can get from almost any county in the United States, and they're overlaying that on some satellite photography or some publicly available aerial photography, and they're rubber banding things a little bit, and they're seeing how things fit. That's what they're doing. That's why you can buy one for a couple $100. Okay, so I don't think they're a boundary survey. I don't even think they're close to being a competent boundary survey. Okay, so here's the second question: Is Viza-Plat practicing surveying without a license? I know a lot of surveyors are not going to be happy to hear me say this, but I think the answer is probably not. They're probably not practicing surveying without a license. That means I think the licensing board in Mississippi might lose their case. So Why do I think that? Why do I think these guys are probably not practicing surveying without a license? Well, it's not because of the cheesy disclaimer. You slap a cheesy disclaimer on your work product, that's not a get out of jail free card. So I don't think that's the reason. But I'll tell you, I do think there are some good reasons why they're probably not practicing surveying. Number one, they're not doing a field survey. So there's no evaluation of evidence on the ground. They're not making any measurements on the ground. I think that's a fundamental part of a boundary survey. All these guys are doing is combining publicly available data, period. They're taking some data from the county GIS. They're taking data that's in a deed. They're taking some satellite photography from Google Earth, and they're putting it in a blender. That's what they're doing. So that is not boundary surveying, folks, I don't think. Now, their clients might be using a Viza-Plat as a substitute for a survey, but that doesn't make it a survey. Just because the clients are misusing that product doesn't mean that that product is something that it's not. And I don't think the company has claimed that they're a survey. I think they are certainly marketing them as a substitute for a survey, but I don't think they have ever, to my knowledge, they have ever claimed that those Viza-Plats are a survey. And I think if a client buys a Viza-Plat for $200 and thinks they're getting a substitute for a boundary survey, that client is ignorant, right? Or foolish, or both. So then that brings me to the third question. Should surveyors have their torches and pitchforks out? You know, should we be protesting? Should we be storming the castle over this thing? Probably not. I don't think we probably need to be doing that. First of all, I think that education here is a more appropriate response than protest or even a lawsuit. You know, I think probably a better move for the surveyors in Mississippi would have been to educate the banks and other customers in the southeastern United States, like, hey, this is not a boundary survey product. You're not paying for a survey. You're not getting a survey. So I think education is the best approach in this particular case. I think we have to be careful as land surveyors that we don't spark an anti-competitive backlash. You know, I think there's some recognition that licensing laws in the United States have probably gone too far. Over the last 20 or 30 years, we probably license more folks. We probably restrict more professions than we need to with licensing rules. And those rules are restrain entry into the professions and dampen competition and raise prices. Probably. I think some of that is true in land surveying. That I'm not saying that we shouldn't license surveyors. Although there are days when I wonder if it's effective. But I do think there is some limited government role for regulation of land surveyors. But I think surveyors have to be really careful because there's the current is turning, the tide's turning against us. And if we overreach, we're going to get spanked hard, probably. So in this particular case, I think a better approach is to just educate people. Hey, this product you're getting from Viza-Plat is garbage. It's not a boundary survey. It's probably not worth the $200 you're paying for it. Now, I want to just point out here that I think the Viza-Plat might actually be a reasonable due diligence tool as part of due diligence. So what a Viza-Plat might do is help you determine if you need to go get a survey. And if that's how banks are using it, then I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. So I want to be really clear here. If the product's being marketed as a substitute for a boundary survey, that's bad. And we should educate people about that. But if the product is just being marketed as another due diligence tool to potentially reveal when you might need a survey, I don't necessarily know that it's a bad thing. It might be a good thing for land surveyors. So it's just something to think about. The other thing I think we need to remember is, you know, before you go tell somebody that they can't do what they're doing because they're not licensed surveyor, you need to have some pretty clear evidence of harm, I think, to the public or to private landowners. I don't know that that's been demonstrated yet in this case. I haven't read of any situation where a Viza-Plat has actually caused harm. Now, one of the things Mr. Lucas mentions in his article is that Viza-Plat could potentially create harm with slander, title, or some other issues, and I think he's right. But I haven't seen anything where that's been demonstrated yet, and I think you probably need a solid demonstration of that harm before you try and sue somebody and tell them they can't run their business because they're not licensed. So that brings me to the fourth question. Could Vizaline hurt their clients or harm the public? Absolutely. Yeah, I think they could. I think it's totally possible they could slander title. I think it's totally possible that people will buy those Viza-Plats and misuse them, think they're a boundary survey when they really aren't. Now, you might be surprised to hear me say that. I just told you I don't think Vizaline is practicing surveying without a license, and I don't think that necessarily suing them was the right move. And then I turn around and tell you that I think they could definitely potentially harm the public. Well, then that seems like a contradiction, right? But I don't think it is, and I'm going to tell you why. First of all, I've learned at 42 years of age, you can't fix stupid all the time. You just can't. There are going to be people that do dumb stuff with real estate. It doesn't matter how much you educate. And if you've got people at banks that are buying these Viza-Plats because they think they're a boundary survey, then they're being foolish. And you know how you fix that foolishness? You let some people get burned, right? Now, that's why we license surveyors, is to prevent that kind of harm. But again, I think there's a balance there, right? If we try and license out all potential market harm, we're going to have licensing laws that are way too broad, and I don't think the public is going to support that. So we have to find a balance. And in this case, given that an actual field survey is not being done and this thing isn't being marketed as a substitute for a boundary survey, I think we may have to tolerate some of the harm that comes to foolish people that buy this product as thinking it's a substitute for a survey. Now, that doesn't mean that I would be against somebody suing Vizaline. If somebody relied on a Vizaline product and got harmed, or their neighbor relied on a Vizaline project and they got harmed, absolutely, I think they should sue the company. That's part of the risk that Vizaline is taking with the product that they're providing. So I just don't know that we as a profession should be taking that fight to them. The other thing I want to remind surveyors is, the market, the free market, has a way of correcting bad ideas. So now that takes time. It does take some time, but if you're in the marketplace with a garbage product that is going to cause more problems than it solves, at some point that's going to catch up to you. And I suspect at some point these guys probably go out of business, because I do think they have a garbage product, and I think it could potentially be misleading, and I think it could do way more harm than it does good. I think the market will fix that at some point. Now, there may be some limited due diligence value in a Viza-Plat. I mentioned that. And so the market's going to tell us if that product is reasonably helpful at the price point, then those guys will stay in business and they'll keep selling the product. If the product is harmful and it doesn't give good value at that price point, then those guys will go out of business. Pretty simple. So again, I think, what's the best thing surveyors can do in this situation? Look, this isn't the last time we're going to see a company like this. GIS is making this easier and easier and easier. These kind of data mashups are getting easier and easier. The best thing surveyors can do is educate, right? Educate the client, educate the public, educate the client, educate the public, educate other people in real estate. That's part of the reason why we do this YouTube channel. I think if we try and beat companies with the licensing laws every time we see something like this, we're going to face a backlash that could be potentially very detrimental to the profession. So look, if you're buying a Viza-Plat from this company in Mississippi, you're not getting a boundary survey. You're getting a $200 version of a free tax assessor map. Use that at your own risk, right? If you really want to know where a piece of property is at, you got to go pay for a boundary survey, and that's not $200. And that's the bottom line.